I just got an update today and earlier this week on a couple of these, and we're tracking to be completed on time. And I'll have a better update next time. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you've got any on what's in front of you.
Any questions? Okay, we have a big agenda, so we'll keep moving right along. Next up is the Finance Quarterly Report.
Good afternoon. So most of ours have kind of moved into that completion area. We've got a couple that are currently ongoing, but we're on track with. One that will carry into next year already, which we haven't started, but we will be fine with that one as well. So if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer that, but nothing's been new added. So
Questions? Thank you very much.
thank you.
Our next item is a resolution for WSDOT land acquisition for sidewalk ramp improvements. Motion by Supervisor Shadron, second by Supervisor Schulteis. Hey, Scott?
Certainly can speak to this. The simple conclusion is Wisconsin DOT is coming in and looking at improving the curb ramps that along State Highway 33 in front of us, all the way from Indiana, right in our middle block, and then all the way down by Rolls Avenue. So it's a good project. They're going to be, if you didn't look at the lath that are out there, they're lath out there showing the locations. But if you drive down 33, you'll see it's all the way through the city. It's not just on our campus. It's actually from one end of the city to the other end of the city. So certainly happily to answer any questions. They're paying us fair market value for the land and a temporary limited easements. They do a little bit of grading, as you imagine, like in front of the building, the sidewalk's got to slope down just a little bit to make sure the curb ramp, so they don't have to move the sidewalk, can actually meet the new standards for ADA compliance.
I have one question. Do they usually line them up straight with the crosswalks and the sidewalks?
That is part of the project. They have to do some repainting and restriping and stuff like that. But yes, we're happy and extremely happy that they're willing to do the mid-block crossing that we have right outside the government center that goes across the street. So we had to work for that one, and they're happy they agreed with us to let that one in place.
Okay. I have a bone to pick. I had a bike accident because of 45-degree ramps instead of perpendicular. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking of the mid-block crosswalk, I noticed that they were addressing that. What improvements are they making on that? Because I do have concern with our employees where they cross their, not that there's a lot of it, but
Sure. Truly just the ramp between the curb and gutter and the sidewalk. So that's all, just that slope that's there. The current slope is just a little bit too steep and it doesn't have that raised area. Oftentimes you'll see a 3-foot by 2-foot pad. It's usually metal, and it's got the raised bumps in it, so people that are can't see or are sight impaired, can feel that with their feet or their cane. So that's a lot of things that are matching. In the old days, you just took the concrete and scribed the concrete. So that's no longer meeting the standards, but they are doing no signage improvements, no middle of the road improvement. We were happy to get what we got so far.
yeah, I was hoping to see one of those pedestrian crosswalks where you press the button and you get the yellow flashies. I think that's, it's such a busy street, and without an actual crosswalk right there, it would be, I think, be good for safety, but it's unfortunate. Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
any other questions? Then we'll vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The next two items are under the purview of our clerk Ashley, who is coming a bit later. So we'll move to item F, use of ARPA funds for Uniquely Wisconsin. And this is just a consensus, so I don't need a motion. But we've done this before, as you might see from the package a couple of years ago, and they're coming around with a second round. So it's ARPA money that we just say consensus okay, and then it moves on. So any discussion or questions? Yes?
It's my opinion that the last time this was done, they did a good job with it, so I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think for those of us going to lacrosse, we might get a little bit more information on that. I think they'll probably do a presentation like they did last time.
Probably.
So, might get a little bit better. But, yeah, I agree. It was well done last time. It really brought to light our tourism and all the rest of that, what we got going on.
So we have a consensus?
Consensus.
Okay. Next up is our guidance on joint review board participation, which will be given by Aaron Dahl.
All right. Good evening again. So the concept, tax incremental financing and tax incremental districts, so TIF and TIDS. We don't talk a lot about that at executive committee. So as I go through this, I'm going to, explain some concepts as necessary. I'm not going to do a TIF 101. If we need to have experts in to do that, I'm happy to, find and invite those folks. And we can talk about that at some point. But for this discussion, really, I think what you need to know is a joint review board oversees TIDS, tax incremental districts, and the joint review board must give its approval when new districts are created, when they're significantly amended, adding project costs, changing boundaries, different things like that. The county is one of 5 voting members on the joint review board, or the JRB. So that's for all districts throughout the county, all the municipalities. The reason joint review boards are given this role is because the jurisdictions they represent, so like I represent the county, when you create a TID, you temporarily forego future tax revenue for the sake of funding projects within that district. I'll keep it as simple as that. But that's really the reason why joint review boards are so important and help to decide about creation and amendment of TIDs. The county executive and the county board chair are included in all the communications that happen when districts are created or amended. And staff, aka me, for the last year or so, I attend, participate, vote in those joint review board meetings as a member representing the county. Historically, our perspective on TIF is, it's one of the only economic development tools a municipality has. As long as it's being used reasonably, the county typically we don't stand in the way of development. So typically we support those districts when they're created. When it comes to modifying districts, adding costs, amending boundaries, we've historically been supportive of that as well when it makes sense. Usually we amend a district when it's done well. When new development is proposed, you amend the district as that happens rather than create some pie in the sky district to start with. So we're generally supportive of all of that, and that's just some background on our perspective. We're very supportive of closing the districts as early as feasible. When you close a district, the taxable property value in that district, it's kind of a complex thing to describe, but basically that value it becomes taxable for the overall operations, which reduces the tax rate. Basically what ends up happening is when a TID closes, it reduces the slice of the pie for the folks that aren't in the TID, because the folks that are now taking on a slice of that pie for funding overall government operations. So that's why we're supportive of closing those TIDs early, or as early as possible. So the reason I'm here today, I'm looking to get the input of elected officials when a decision point maybe seems gray, as it relates to, you know, creation or changes of a TIF, or a TID rather. So, you know, rather than having me, an unelected county employee, I hesitate to use the B word, bureaucrat, but that's what I am. Rather than have me make the call on my own, I'm looking to have a discussion about your perspective and, you know, get your thoughts on some of these districts, you know, as elected representatives of the county.
If we may interrupt just a minute. I'm familiar with TIFs. I'm sure that you are as ex-president of Jackson. We talked about a little teaching thing at one point that Christian Tetschlock does all the time. Are you too interested, or you know about TIDs?
I kind of know the basis of them. I mean, it's like a tax break to get the business going and stuff like that.
In
Like
some
you said,
cases.
other people pick up the tab. But I don't know the intricate parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be good to know that. I mean, if there's something I could read or something, or a video.
Sure,
Google video.
I could look at some easy materials. Certainly, the TID manual is out there, but I don't think you need to read that.
Yeah, right? How about TID for Dummies? Yeah?
Okay, I'll
Like
see if
that.
that's out there.
Cliff notes, yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Get those feelings.
It would be just to review it and get an understanding again.
Yeah.
Supervisor Schulteis, your thoughts? Okay. The more you learn, the more you know you don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
we talked a little bit Monday and today, and this one, MPTC is part of the taxing district, so it's just a little bit, but this tax affects people in Ripon because it affects how much they pay to MPTC. So it's not just West Bend; it has a big effect. So, you wanted to say something,
Yes, please.
Supervisor Schwab?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In general, I'm in favor of tax increment districts, provided that the numbers work out. And it's been my experience that Ellers does a very thorough job planning them out. And on that basis, I really don't see a reason to deny or to vote against very many tax increment districts. In this case, I struggled with this one because improving a roadway adjacent or into the tax increment district seemed to me to be a little bit of a stretch. If the roadway was inside the district itself, if it was a roadway that came up immediately to it, and Indiana Avenue does, but it just seems to me that it's a bit of a stretch to include that in the tax increment district.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some insights that someone else has, and I understand that the city of West Bend sees itself as needing additional funds for roadways. If this were directly inside the district itself, I'd say it'd be a no-brainer. But in this case, I'm struggling a bit.
You want to continue?
No, thank you, and that's exactly why I brought this one forward here today. When I guess I would like to, you know, start bringing these on a regular basis, maybe as a consent agenda for the ones that make sense or that don't have that gray area, but at least for this body to see what's happening out there. I think that may be useful to you, but in cases like this, I really appreciate the feedback and the discussion on that.
As a contrast, you talked about a couple other TIDs and comparing them.
Yeah.
You want to go into them?
Sure. You know, September's been a busy month, right? There are 4 right now being proposed or amended throughout the county. So, you know, there are some good examples that are out there that come to mind. You know, one great example, TID number 9 in Germantown. If there is a no-brainer, this one seems like it. it's been performing. It was created in 2022. It's been performing very well ever since. Sterling Pharma is a big player in this TID. The village. This is a case where the village is coming back seeking an amendment to add more territory. They use a very conservative approach. The development incentive, the developer incentive structure is very, very conservative, very reasonable compared to what else is happening out there. And on top of all of that, it's going to reduce the life of the TID by 4 years, right? So I didn't include all of these examples in the packet just because I didn't want you to have this many pages to wade through, but I wanted to just highlight that as an example of a case where it makes sense for us to just say this looks great, move on. Another example, TID number 5 in Kewaskum, that's the one that's being created to facilitate the redevelopment of the former Regalware headquarters, right, into multifamily development. So again, the estimates are conservative. It's estimated to close earlier than the statute allows. So again, a good story. Full disclosure, this is the Next Gen Housing Development Initiative. But this TID is not a rubber stamp by the county by any means. Early in the process, the county exec identified a couple things, a couple of concerns he had with that initial project plan. And the village was very open, so kudos to the village and Village President Martin and Administrator Adam Gitter. They've been great throughout the process. And so it's another case where there's that back and forth ahead of time. It all makes sense. It all lines up. So, that's another example of, maybe it's just a consent agenda that this one looks good. You guys can take a look and confirm that. So the West Bend one that is highlighted in the packet is an example of that gray area where I would appreciate the discussion. To Supervisor Schwab's point, there's one other nuance I'd like to identify with the fourth and final example of another TID that's being considered, which is TID 13 in Hartford. With that one, there's another road project that's being proposed that is just outside the boundaries of the district itself. In this case, the TID is being created to facilitate development of an assisted living campus, so 96 assisted living units. The proposed road project is to connect an existing road. I believe I think it's called Shower Drive in Hartford. Essentially, it's connecting their new satellite fire station to a more main thoroughfare, which would then, facilitate emergency services to that assisted living facility. So, there's the road project itself. It's only $500,000, so it's a lot less than the one in West Bend, but still, it's outside the district and it's a road project. So but it is for a public safety purpose. So I wanted to just get some thoughts on maybe that nuance, if that makes a difference to you, or does it make sense to ask that the district funds only a portion of that cost, or do you have any thoughts?
Supervisor Shadwin?
Coming in here kind of new, right?
Yeah.
With an understanding. So with your Hartford example, and then going back to this TIF 16, my question would be, for instance, on the 16 in West Bend here, is there that road that's tied into the TIF district? Is there any reason that that road would have anything to do, like Mike said, with that TIF district? Like, are they thinking that the traffic count's gonna go way up because of the development there, therefore they need to do something with that road, and that's why it's tied in?
Well,
Is
so
there language like that? I mean, is that,
the
otherwise, why else would it be brought in and, right, highlighted later on as an afterthought?
the language that we were provided was that that road is a main thoroughfare, and that's it. It doesn't say much else along those lines. One thing to point out is that when we originally approved this district, that road was not in the project plan. It was kind of added in now. So in my mind, a question is raised like, why now, right? Just because we can afford it now doesn't mean we should necessarily. So hence, this is why I'm bringing this to you today.
Supervisor Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I read through this pretty well as a supervisor of West Bend, and I look at this. From what I see of the numbers, nothing's really true. They're just projections. I mean, it projects that it's going to possibly be in there. It's overperforming now. But of course, there's nothing to say that that might change within the next 2 years, depending on the election or what happens. We don't know. So there's a certain gamble on that, which I'm uncomfortable with. Also, to Mr. Supervisor Schwab's point, you may say overall that it serves that TID district as a way in, but there's another cross street here also that I see that comes in, and Indiana from the south also comes in. So I find that as a bit of a stretch. And keep in mind, I'm a West Bend resident. So while I would like our roads to get fixed in West Bend, it's certainly something I campaigned on when I ran for mayor. I don't see if a TID is going to be able to be cleared out early, which would be great. It would be beneficial to all the parties involved, all the taxing authorities. I think it should be. And when you look at this, adding this road benefits West Bend greatly, but I don't see the village of Jackson continuing with this TID and continuing to not receive payments from it, how they benefit, or the town of West Bend or Richfield. This is the problem that I have with this idea. It's sort of along the same lines as when they did the TID over for the district where they added in the river walk area. Well, to me, that's a park. That's not really part of redoing land and cleaning up brownfield site and redeveloping land that was blighted or, giving you almost little to no taxing. I don't see how this necessarily increases the taxing authority of the TID, which is another reason why we do TIDs, is to increase the taxes that come out of it. You're giving up your money now for more money later. I don't see how this accomplishes that goal as well. If I were to give you guidance, it would be, these are the questions that I have. These are the concerns and the problems that I have. And I would bring those things up to the rest of the group. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't necessarily do it, but I would want some kind of satisfactory answers to those questions from the proposers of this, to say, well, why? Why should Jackson and town of West Bend and Richfield and Germantown and the school districts be chipping in on a TID that, directly benefits West Bend, a brand new road, $2.6 million? How does that help them?
Yeah, and in the packet that we received, it said that this project cost is not anticipated to have any impact in the incremental value of the district itself. So you've articulated the balancing test that a joint review board needs to go through, right? do the improvements associated with this benefit the district enough to outweigh the concessions being made by the overlying taxing jurisdictions? And so you've articulated that balancing test that the JRB needs to go through. So.
Excellent comments. Supervisor Schultheis.
So again, being very new to this whole TID and TIF concept and actuality, as we discussed, that's great, you've gotten some thoughts. You mentioned something interesting about, so maybe is there a portion of it that what options do we have if we say, yeah, we're not so, you take that information back, can it be reworded, rebuilt?
I think it can. An example of that is the Kewaskum TID number 5 that's being proposed. To serve that new development, they need a lift station to be built for the water piece. The district is funding 10% of the costs of that lift station. The rest of the costs are being borne by the utility and things like that. So yes, there is some districts use a calculation when it comes to project costs outside of this half mile or inside of this half mile boundary. So absolutely, that is a discussion point that could be had. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Yeah, I'll jump in too. That common sense piece. Is it necessary for the TIF to be successful? And in that case, in Kewaskum, it's like, yeah, you can argue 10% of that lift station is going to serve that development. Makes perfect sense. This road called a thoroughfare, I drove down it the other day. It's just a neighborhood street, and it's not in horrible shape compared to lots in West Bend. So, balancing the interests of the taxpayer, for me, I would not look at this one favorably. Now, as was just brought up, pay for a couple blocks of it, maybe that's reasonable, but that's in the hands of the Joint Review Board, outside our expertise. Supervisor Schwab.
I think one thing to remember as well is that you're only one vote of 5. So even if you were to raise serious questions, our point of view may not matter, right? So there's that as well.
That's a great point. My understanding is that some school districts are using an approach similar to this, and so I think the goal would be to communicate that to some of our partners on the JRB. Just no walking quorums, no anything like that, no shenanigans, but just an opportunity for more discussion to happen.
Use common sense in all these situations. Supervisor Kelling.
And that's why, with the points that I raised, they're not to say that we should automatically be a no. Because, if general consensus among the JRB is that, this is something we should look at, we could look at. All I'm saying is answer these questions. How does this directly benefit all the players in this? Is it something that makes the district better? How does it improve it? What effects this might have? And those are the things you should be asking yourself if you want to do a project like this, in this type of format. There's other ways to finance roads, and maybe this is just the way they thought that they could, and I'm not commenting yes or no. I mean, heck, if I were the administrator, I'd probably go this route too. Why not? It's worth the ask. But it's certainly also worth the standing up to the scrutiny and the test. And in it, general consensus is that, yeah, we can live with this. We think it's creative. We think it's great. I'm not going to sit there and say you must stand firm against the headwind, but I just want to make sure that those things are absolutely raised.
Great. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, one last item too. With regards to the Indiana Avenue in purple here, I mean, if they're replacing that just to do the road, then like everybody said here, I'd question it. But if they're doing it because maybe they have to bring a new water supply feed for the pumps, well, now there's a reason, right? You gotta do work, you gotta tear up the road anyway, you might as well improve it. So those are just some added thoughts to it too.
Definitely.
Supervisor Schwab.
I hope my very last comment. If this were absolutely necessary for the success of the TID, I'm surprised it wasn't included in the beginning.
Bingo.
The fact that it's
Yeah.
included afterwards
It's suspect.
leads me to question its necessity.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Dahl, do you have
I-
the input you needed?
I do. I think I've got plenty. I
Okay.
really appreciate all the good discussion and feedback. This was very helpful.
And I think this committee would welcome the chance to chime in the future.
Absolutely.
Anytime you want us to.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. I see our clerk is here now, so we'll go back to item 3D on tax deed properties.
Thank you. So in your packet, you have two committee reports with the listing of tax deed properties that we're bringing forward today. The first committee report will be asking for a motion to authorize the county attorney to take the deeds of the properties and then send their standard notice to the former owners, allowing them that one last chance to redeem, which is where they have to pay the full amount of taxes, interest penalties, and special assessments due by the deadline specified in that letter. I do want to point out one property that's on the list, which is V3, which is Village of Jackson 0141. That property we are not recommending to take as of right now. We're working through some brownfields issues or concerns that we have with that property before we take it.
I noticed the one below that has some bolded numbers. Is that significant?
No, I think that's just a formatting issue.
Okay. So I guess we need a motion and a second for this. Supervisor Schwab, Supervisor Shadrin. Any discussion or questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
My motion would be, with the exception of the property noted, to move the recommendation as provided in the committee report.
And is that agreeable to the second?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? And all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, and then the second item, the committee report specifies each of the properties, and obviously we will be skipping over the V30141 property because you just voted not to take that property, so just disregard the minimum bid amount recommendation. But all of the other properties are listed with their tax key number, address, and prior owner's name, and the recommended minimum bid amount for those properties. So once the timeline has expired for them to redeem, if they still have not, then the next step for our office is to, we publish a notice and then we put the properties out for bid on Wisconsin Surplus for the minimum bid amount. That's the starting point, and then we leave them on their website typically for a week to 2 weeks, and then we bring the winning bid amounts back for final approval. But as you can see, the minimum bid amounts, we have just rounded up to basically cover the taxes, interest penalties, and special assessments that are due to the county and the municipality.
Thank you. On this one, I'll make the motion. I'll look for a second. Supervisor Schulteis, any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you for your work on this, Ashley.
Thank you.
Our next item is the Next Generation Housing Frameworks updates.
Hi, if you struggle to hear me, let me know, and I will adjust. I do apologize for the mask. Adam and I had an interesting weekend after a conference of being exposed. So, but we are feeling much better now. So, If you would like for the framework, I can go item by item or go through all of them at once.
I believe the changes are highlighted in red in our packet. Do we have specific questions?
Yeah, there was at least on this first one. So I don't know there.
Maybe you can expand a little bit.
Absolutely. So I will start with item number 1, and all of these were approved by our Next Generation Housing Committee and recommended to the Executive Committee for approval. The reallocations of funds within an approved project. As a part of a larger project scope, there may be many different contracts to try to get a Next Generation Housing project to completion. So, for example, in the Oaks of Jackson, there have been a couple different contracts, whether that be environmental work, planning work, engineering work, and then infrastructure construction are kind of the big ones. And sometimes those contracts that have been closed out have remaining funds available that, oh, yes.
So to be clear, all the work is completed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, so the contract is closed, but there's an unused balance on that. So what this item is saying, because the framework doesn't address this right now, it is saying that at the discretion of the community development director, they would be able to reallocate those funds that are remaining in that closed out contract to an approved project scope with a contract that may be still open. So for example, within that Stantec contract, there's about $1,300 remaining. That may be able to be reallocated to an infrastructure project that has been approved by the Next Generation Housing Committee and this committee if there is remaining work that may need to be done. So if there is a request for reallocation for a non-approved scope, that would be a new request that would come through the Next Generation Housing Committee as well as the Executive Committee.
Makes sense.
Okay.
And then item number 2, that is just minor minor language change from removing the word also and adding the word if any before procuring cause. And then clarification for builder's review of all offers. It would be removing the place conditions in advance because builders do sometimes place conditions like pre-approval letters when they're posting on MLS. So this would just be to align with the intent of the section, not to limit or prescribe what the builder may want or what the conditions are, but that the builder is just reviewing all the offers that they receive. And then the last one is clarification of earnest money. So this is also within the framework. This is replacing out-of-pocket loss with the language estimated actual losses. Out-of-pocket losses often deal with third-party contractors that the builder is directly paying. So this is just reframing it for the intent of the section, which is to be estimating actual losses from the builder in that instance.
Any questions or discussion? Supervisor Schwab. We have a motion. Motion by Supervisor Schwab, second by Supervisor Schultheis. You have a question, comment?
Yep. Now, with regard to item number 1, and we may need Mr. Dahl's input on this one, does doing this in any way conflict or impact existing fiscal policy with regard to just moving funds from one area to another?
That's a great question.
That would be my only concern. I think it makes sense, but if it conflicts with existing policy, we may want to reconsider.
I believe this would not conflict with the policy. Our policy is at the fund level. The fund itself is an umbrella over the top of these individual pieces. So I believe we would still be within our existing policy to work under this model.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. The next item is the housing fund request for the Oaks of Jackson from the village. Is that you also?
Yes, I'll be handling all the next generation housing items today.
Okay.
So this one is for a request for $40,000 for the final lift of asphalt within the Oaks of Jackson. This was not included within that initial project scope for infrastructure construction. The project site concept plan proposed 101 units, and that is what was proposed and bid out. And when the village was working with Hillcrest Builders specifically, who is constructing the duplex units on the site, they are actually able to fit one more building or two more units on the site. So the total unit count is going to go up from 101 to 103. Therefore, the village isn't utilizing that full capacity that they're able to with Next Gen Housing, identifying $20,000 per owner-occupied unit. So this essentially requests that additional $40,000 for those two more units that will be used for the final lift in the fall of 2025 or the spring of 2026, depending on how construction is going at that point.
So I saw that the total price of the asphalt is $150,000, but we're only paying $40,000 because it's on that pro rata basis.
Correct, yes. And I do believe the village would need to go through another bid process for that.
Okay. Supervisor Schwab?
I would move recommendation, or move approval per the recommendation on the committee report.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next is the fund request from Hillcrest Builders for the Oaks. Permit fee incentive.
Water break. Yes, this one is also within the Oaks of Jackson. Hillcrest Builders is proposing constructing the two outlot developments, which is the townhome and the rear-loaded single-family. So as a part of that, they're requesting $318,000 as a part of the core construction permit fee incentive. That is a part of Next Generation Housing 2.0. So there is going to be a total of 53 units between the two outlots. They're going to be focusing on outlot 8 first, which is consistent of 18 townhomes and the 13 rear-loaded fee-simple single-family homes. So they're going to be working on constructing those. They are also going to be constructing the infrastructure on that site. So as a part of that, they are requesting that these up to $6,000 permit fee incentive for those home constructions. And the fee would be paid to the village at the time. And as you can see, there is a total of just under, there's about $9,000 in permitting for the single family, as well as just over $18,000 for the permitting for two townhomes, or just over $9,000 as well. So each unit averages out to $9,000 for the permit fees, and eligible uses of that funds is just under $8,000, excuse me. So this would be allocating that up to $6,000, and then the builder would be paying that remaining amount. And the park impact fee is excluded from that.
So in simple terms, the other parts of this project that are already completed had similar fees, and now we're starting a new phase, and we're doing the same thing.
Correct.
Basically.
Yes, you'll see that the homes that Hillcrest is constructing, those interior lots, are priced under $320,000, as well as the duplex units. And with Next Generation Housing 2.0, that price point did increase. So that would be reflected in that next phase of development as well. But they would be under that $340,000 price point.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Supervisor Kelly? And we need a motion and a second again. Motion by Supervisor Kelly, second by Supervisor Shadron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure if I'm even on the right track with this, but when we started this whole Next Generation Housing project, we were kind of looking at the expense of permits and what our municipalities have per household to add on. And some of them really make a lot of sense when I look at like your electrician and your plumbing and your occupancy, because somebody has to physically go there and look at the stuff, and so that's time and maybe even some material. But then some of the other stuff, and I'm familiar with erosion control and stuff like that too. But some of the other stuff, like the fire service impact fee, the police service impact fee, I'm a little less inclined on some of those things, because the idea is to make homes more affordable, and municipalities, their fees make them somewhat less affordable. And this program is designed to try and work with the county, the developers, the municipalities. Have we seen any kind of movement on municipalities, or is there anything that can be done to try and bring these fees to maybe something a little bit more reasonable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as a part of Next Generation Housing, we're definitely expanding that conversation to talk to municipalities about the impact fees, and this does shine a light on that with $9,000 per unit for a single family, which is that's a 1,300 square foot home approximately. We haven't seen any municipalities directly reduce fees to my knowledge, but we are definitely having those conversations with the municipalities, and I think that this permit fee incentive is a really great way to start and to shine the light on that.
But does it then incentivize them to keep their fees because they're getting the money, or does it cause them to look at their fees and go, we are benefiting. In the end, you're going to build this house in Jackson, and you're going to have the tax base there, and you're going to hopefully move in a family that can work in your stores and your shops, and so there's other benefits with doing this. That's why the whole project exists. But I think immediately collecting fees just seems to me to be counterproductive to what it is we're actually trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, well, and I believe that this permit fee incentive is directly helping the home buyer and the builder themselves, because then, they don't have to borrow as much from the bank at a 9% interest rate to build this house. So then that lowers the cost overall for the home buyer at the end. And as a part of this $6,000, that's going to be a part of that end of deed restriction that, the builder doesn't get to make money on this $6,000. It's part of that cost reduction. So we're definitely still having those conversations. But this has been, we have 3, this is going to be the second, and then the next one is the third request for this permit fee incentive. So it is, builders are very interested in this.
Supervisor Schwab.
Thank you. You raise an excellent question. There's 2 aspects I think we should consider. First is that when the impact fees are calculated, typically if it is a company like Ellers that specializes in municipal finance and how all that works, and so I understand excluding the park service impact fee, but like the fire service, police service, sewer, and water, those are all calculated as actual costs of what it costs to extend the line to that area or provide those services. So I think those are legitimate costs. The other thing I think we should consider is I'm not sure everybody in the county is still on board with next generation housing. So especially in my community, I recognize that there were people who were very much against it. And if people would see that, the people who are buying next generation housing don't have to pay those services, how come I did? I think it creates a disparity and a challenge that the whole next generation housing program would have to work very hard to overcome.
It's definitely a healthy conversation to have, on both sides.
Yep.
Now I got a better understanding of it, and I get it. But also, we wanted to have everybody have a little bit of a hand in the game.
No. You go first.
No, he had his say. Now it's your turn.
Okay. I have 2 items. Number 1, that's a good one, but would we allow them, or could we have them work it off like we do with the down payment incentive program as part of the permit fees too? Would that be less of a hit to the taxpayer saying, well, we're not just handing it out, they have to work it off?
I think that's a thought we throw back in the hands of the people setting up the program.
So the Next Generation Housing Initiative and the Heart and Homestead are two separate programs that are operated a little differently. So the home buyer, actually, they're not receiving this as a handout. It's a part of a deed restriction that would be placed on the property. So if they sell that home, the deed restriction lasts 5 years. If they sell that home within 5 years, they have to pay a portion of that back to Washington County. So it's not just given out for free. It's the same with the property lien where they're paying that back at home's closing, or as a part of the single families in the Oaks of Jackson or in some of the other next generation housing developments. There's a deed restriction of a more substantial amount where if they sell, they have to pay that back.
That's right. So that does kind of work in. My second question is, again, Aaron, if you could remind me, this 318,000, this is still part of that funds that we allocated for Next Generation, right? It's not coming out of like the general fund, or that was all, okay.
It's still ARPA money.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're still pulling out of that fund. So thank you. That's all I have.
Any further questions or discussion? Supervisor Schwab, your turn now.
I think you make a valid point with regard to, it's important that communities throughout our county start to look at ways to make housing cheaper. And as we consider setbacks and lot sizes and house size restrictions, I think those are all very important to consider. I think the sidewalks and lighting and all the other things that sometimes get added on, those are all very important to consider. But as far as the fire, police, sewer, and water impact fees, I think those are all things that are legitimate costs.
Actual expenses.
Yeah, and I concede the point. Absolutely, makes sense.
Supervisor Schwab, as a former village president, you bring a good perspective on this sort of thing.
Educate us.
So,
Thank you.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next, we come to Cedar Creek Townhomes. Item K.
Absolutely. So this is also utilizing that 100% core construction permit fee incentive. This is within the Village of Jackson, but separate from the Oaks of Jackson. Cedar Creek Townhomes is being developed by American companies. They are requesting $216,000 for 36 owner-occupied townhome units in the Village of Jackson. They are going to be priced in that $299,000 to $339,000 price range, so they do fit within the Next Generation Housing 2.0 framework. If you look at a per unit eligible cost for permit fee incentives, it does average out to be just about $7,300, and that does not include the contractor permit fees. So the total cost of all of the permits, eligible or not, is just under $300,000 for the site. Eligible permits is $263,900. So this is another development. They were initially going to be utilizing that $20,000 per owner-occupied unit. Instead, it is being funded through private investment, and they are interested in using that $6,000. So again, this would act as that deed restriction on the property for that $6,000. It would not be given out to them if they were to sell. They would pay a portion of that back. So you'll see the a screening checklist, the permit fee lists, as well as the site plan. They're going to be starting with building Southwest A, and currently I believe the site plans are getting reviewed by the state right now.
So the request right now is $216,000.
Correct.
A motion to move that forward.
Motion by Supervisor Kelling, second by Supervisor Schwab. Where exactly is this?
It is just south of the Piggly Wiggly. There is if you look on your site plan here, this is an existing senior center. So it's just on the eastern side of the Village of Jackson, south of 33.
Thank you. Any
Or
further
60.
further questions or discussion?
No, I think we covered them on the first one. The questions I had.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next up is item L, Brownfields County Assessment Fund request by Matter Development.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So before you, we have a funding request for a site called the Gaelic Pit in the city of Hartford. So I don't know if the TID that you had mentioned before was the same TID, but there is a TID on this related to the site. So this is a new site for the site redevelopment program. Currently, it's between 20 or 40 acres, and it was previously used as a fill site. Well, it was a quarry, and then it was being used as a fill site for a fire. So there's a lot of wood ash that was used and filled on the site. Previously, there was a phase 1 and a phase 2 completed on the site from a developer, I think in about before. Either way, the phase 1 and phase 2 was completed, but for some reason they chose not to continue with the development of the site, and they stepped away from the site. So that phase 1 and phase 2 was never actually reported to the Wisconsin DNR. So as a part of this funding request, the initial part is environmental reporting. So it would be reporting the results of those two the phase 1 and the phase 2, and then additional supplemental assessment work. So additional soil borings, groundwater monitoring wells, and things like that.
So might it be that they found something they didn't like and dropped the project?
I've heard stories about, it was either issues with the contamination on the site, or it was discussions with the city and site access that made the developers walk away. The new developers, actually, just want to make sure I mention it, the redevelopment of the site it's the senior living facility. Well, it's not a senior living facility. It's like rental. Yeah. But then also that's only 5 acres of the parcel, and then the remaining portions were meant to be multifamily development. So in total, it is $60,400 for the total project costs. Of that, $48,360 would come from the site redevelopment program, and 20% that $12,090 would come from Matter Development. That's all the additional. Well, I can mention the phase 2 results had VOCs, organic compounds, and but that's it.
And this was discussed in the site redevelopment committee?
Yep, and they recommended approval.
Okay. Any questions?
I want to, but no, I guess not.
We have a motion and a second.
So seconded.
Moved by Supervisor Schultheis, second by Supervisor Kelly. The good news is these site redevelopment sites, they make tax districts out of what is wasteland now. So any further questions? All in favor?
Just a little
Oh,
bit.
okay. Supervisor Kelly.
So basically, this 48,000 is going to be for filing with the state.
No, so it will be with filing with the state, but it'll also be here. I can get the. It's also supplemental assessment work, so it's actually like on-site assessment work.
Boring
So
tests or stuff like that.
yeah, they're going to look at the site more and see if there's any other, or basically confirm the phase 2 results, and then just assess it more to see if there's any other concerns. Yep.
So do we have the phase 2 results from before?
Yes.
They're just never reported to
They
the
just
state.
haven't been reported to the state.
So we have some data.
So we have to. The process would be to send that to the state first. They would assign it what's called a BERTS number, and then that BERTS number it's basically just identifying that there was contamination on the site, and here's what was on the site, and it's currently open and in the process of being remediated or redeveloped.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move on to the 2 on Rego Place.
Yes. So this isn't a new site for the site redevelopment program. This is the site that's connected to Next Gen Housing, the old Regal office. So they had come to the site redevelopment program for phase 2. They completed the work for the phase 2. They identified PFAS and chloroform on the site, and now they need additional assessment work to delineate the extent of that. In this case, there's also that environmental reporting aspect, but that'll be covered in the next funding request. So this funding request is just for that supplemental assessment work, extra soil borings, groundwater monitoring wells, and then additionally, they're also requesting for a vapor mitigation system engineering specs. So this isn't something that the SRC has approved or seen in the past. We've never seen it in the past, but it does qualify for funding through the framework. So this is kind of like things like, it would be similar to like a site or a CAP maintenance plan that we've approved in the past. It's basically just the design work for the mitigation of the contaminants, but not the actual the installment of the vapor mitigation system. That won't
Kind of
qualify.
the engineering work before the actual work.
Right. So the SRC, I mentioned that to the SRC, and they didn't have any issues with that. So they also recommended approval for this site as well. There is actually also environmental reporting aspects to this funding request that are related to a remedial action plan and a remedial action options report. Lots of acronyms, but basically it's the Wisconsin DNR asking, like, what are you going to do to remediate the site? And those are kind of the activities related to the environmental reporting. But in total, it is $65,000, and $52,000 would come out of the site redevelopment program, and then that 20% match would be $13,000 from Regal Place LLC. So that is all I have.
Supervisor Schwab.
I would move approval of the recommendation per the committee report of $52,000.
I'll second that. Any discussion, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this, I guess, is more of a procedural question. This didn't come before land use and planning. Shouldn't this?
That's a good question.
I mean, it's coming direct. All these seem to be land use and planning, and yet all of them are coming direct to executive. And
Well, no,
I
there's
don't know.
site redevelopment has always been under the
Executive
framework of executive, yeah. So, and it's a good question. Oh, I'm glad you're here.
The typical process is, the site redevelopment committee, which, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a committee made up of coalition partners from, it's like 12 entities, but basically all of our incorporated communities. So like the Village of Jackson, the City of West Bend, they all have a representative on it, and then they recommend, and then after that recommendation, it's the executive committee that's typically it's been sent to.
And on that committee, we are represented by me and Supervisor Krebs. So, Supervisor Schwab.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that sub-slab passive vapor mitigation system engineering specs and some of the other aspects of this are not part of the normal site redevelopment costs. It's my opinion that they are necessary to get this property back into use and back on a higher use on the tax rolls. And so while it may be out of the ordinary, I don't have a problem with it because it's what has to happen to make it happen.
With a capital happen, because we're going to put housing on this. The last thing we want to do is have anything hazardous remaining there. So it's the right thing to do. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And then following that is reimbursement. Now explain to me the difference between assessment and reimbursement.
Yes.
Is that some work that's already been done?
Yes. So, as I had mentioned before, the environmental reporting aspect, a portion of it was already completed, or it was recommended that it be completed early. So, once the phase 2 results are completed, it has to be sent to the DNR, as I've kind of mentioned before. And due to the schedule of the project, we wanted them to get ahead of the game. Especially with the DNR of lately, they've been a little bit slow on reviewing some of these items, and it has taken some time. So we recommended that they actually submit the hazardous substance discharge form and the historic fill exemption form to the Wisconsin DNR as soon as the results were completed. And then ask for the reimbursement for these activities after. Typically, this would be requested in a funding request, and then it would be approved, and then it would be sent to the DNR. So these are activities that have already been funded in previous sites, and so the new aspect is just asking for a reimbursement instead of first asking for the funds and then sending it in. So. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. But
And this was all approved by that committee.
And this was approved by the
last week?
SRC. I mean, they heard it and they understood, especially with the project and with the TID timeline. And there's a certain time that the building has to come down, that we wanted to engage the Wisconsin DNR as soon as possible. So. In total, it's that $3,500, and $2,800 would come from the SRP, and $700 would come back from Regal Place LLC. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Knowing that the wheels of government often turn slowly, and in order to get anything done, sometimes we have to move ahead and step back to the government to kind of cover our backsides. I would definitely motion this forward and consider.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I can say.
Supervisor Shadron seconds. Any further discussion?
I can also mention that the DNR has gotten back to us actually this week. So it's been positive that we asked them to look at it ahead of time. So, yep.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Also passes unanimously. Our last item is a resolution for acceptance of the Next Gen 911 grant. I'll take a motion in a second, please. Supervisor Schultheis, Supervisor Shadron. I don't know who's presenting this, if anybody. Oh, Aaron is.
Thank you. Me again. Our GIS director is out adventuring in New England, so I'm going to try and take this one for him. But really, this is just a simple grant acceptance resolution. So the resolution would allow us to modify the budget if and when we did get the grant. The timing of this was such that if it depending on when in October it was announced. We wanted to have our ducks in a row before that would happen, and the timeline would potentially lapse before we could, get formal approval. So we just wanted to do that now. The application contained really two projects. One is sort of a continuation of a project that's happening right now in the 2024 fiscal year. Which is really data cleanup, essentially, field verification of the data. That's a smaller dollar amount. The other project is temporary funding for a GIS analyst, which would, it would take a little bit of some of the burden off of some of the sheriff's staff in the communication center. Right now, they're doing a lot of the Next Gen 911 prep work over there. As you know, they're also in the process of onboarding Germantown with Consolidated Dispatch, so they got their hands full over there right now. This would help resolve some of that workload for them, but also it would allow our existing GIS staff to work on other priorities. You'll learn a little bit more next month about what those priorities are, but it's in the shared services arena, and so you'll hear a little bit more next month about what that actually is. It would be great to have done these both at the same time, but like I said, the timing of accepting this grant was such that we had to bring it a little bit early. So. I'm happy to answer some of the questions. If you've got a lot of technical Next Gen 911 questions, I may have to limp through it or may have to get back to you, but generally speaking, I think I can answer any questions.
I think we're all pretty familiar with the framework and what's been happening on Next Gen 911 for quite some time now. Mm-hmm. So I'm good with it. Anyone else?
Good.
Well, then all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Great.
Excellent. Passes unanimously. This will come before the county board. Our next meeting date is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024 at 4 p.m. This meeting's adjourned.